Throughout our childhood, my brother and I were continually subjected to our father's psychotic and even narcissistic behavior. One such problem we could do nothing about was him asking us to ask our mother whenever he wanted a cup of tea, as with everything else, while the entire family was in the same room. It was almost as if she was in a different town. Our mother felt that this was the only remaining communication method at the time, and did just the same. For instance, ask your dad if he wants to have a cup of tea. This situation was irritating, and yet we dared not say or do anything to that effect. Even when going out with my brother, we were told first to ask him, or her, before leaving, about what they might want. At first I thought this was a normal daily occurrence, which happened with other families as well, but soon I was to discover to my dismay that it was a rare event created by disturbed-minded people. I only wished I could help our father overcome his psychological problems, but all I could do was put up with it, and, out of respect for our elders, could say nothing. He continued with his unique attitude towards us as well as with his gambling habits, losing large sums of money in the process. Whenever he was depressed, he repeatedly said he would rather spend time with his longtime friend Fatima, who lived somewhere else in Ankara, but I don't even remember seeing her. Could it be another reason why he wanted to stay in Turkey? I believe he hoped his boys were going to be involved in military service, for that was the only thing he knew as being worthwhile. No matter where one lived, any kind of military service would be apparently provide young men with much-needed discipline, and while they matured, they would become tough adults determined to do everything right. This certainly is a noble thought. I was unable to understand the logic behind his obsessive desire for us to become proper Turkish citizens, and whether it was necessary to be enrolled for military service in that country just to prove that we were accepted as real. In truth, he was extremely short-sighted in thinking about why one should be forced into citizenship of a nation where one could not be considered as a normal human being due to one's race. Was he also willing us to accept the local religion? But in actual fact he was an atheist. I could not accept being thus used, even if it was to make a twisted-minded person like him feel proud. It really is so painful to refer to someone's usual characteristics, particularly when one is attempting to describe one's flesh-and-blood relative. Besides, part of old Armenia was no more. It was the land of Turks now. We had no voice as Armenians surviving in Turkey. As long as the human race persists with their traditional ways, there will always be national borders, national pride, and religions. That is how life has been lived in this world for a very long time now. If one desired to live happily, one needed to learn to accept and adhere to the principles and traditions of the nation where one was born. That may be one way of making and keeping wonderful friends, but it would be impossible where one was never accepted as a human being. Despite all the characteristics our father presented, whenever we had a chance to go on an outing, mostly under some encouragement from our cousins, and he laughed a little, probably influenced by alcohol. It was nice to see. On the other hand, wherever I was forced to live, whether in Paris or Istanbul, it did not matter. I always attempted to find opportunities to run away from my family home and start my own life. This interest in desperation was at its height when I was about 15. I even asked my mother how she would feel if I left and went to another country where I could work and study, for I felt that there was no joy in living this way with someone whom we had to identify as our father, bent on his own interests. I would not wish any harm to him, for he was my father, yet I could not live under his undesirable persona. Istanbul or Ankara was not going to be my ultimate destination, and I did not desire to live anywhere else in that country, wherein many opportunities for me to excel were denied, as was oft demonstrated. The truth is that I was utterly against my father's wishes after experiencing his behavioral and psychological problems. I wanted peace. Besides, when in Turkey I was nothing more than a foreigner and an infidel, unworthy to be called a human being. I was forced to always feel completely embarrassed for being who or what I was. On the other hand, I felt I had no real home and was like an unwelcome stranger. In a proverb, as mentioned before, in a similar fashion, it is emphasized, a drowning man would grab even the sharpest blade to save his life. That was indeed descriptive of my existence. I certainly experienced very interesting and delightful things also, but some of them I preferred to keep to myself, knowing that I would only be laughed at. For example, my experience of time dilation or time travel was something I could never forget. During one Christmas time, feeling so unusually happy, I wished it would never end. Alas, it was not to last long, just like all the other Christmases, when the rest of the world was at peace. Oh, how much I wished that it would be a forever time of peace and joy. I remember how the next morning it was no longer going to be the festive season. After wishing my mother and brother a very good night before going to bed, I mentally forced myself to glide into the festive season of the following year. I knew strongly that I was to wake up into that following year's festive season. Was I dreaming? I cannot say. However, I remember clearly that I drifted into an excellent dream of accelerating fast into distances which could not easily be described. Upon my waking, I discovered my mother preparing a lovely breakfast. My brother showed me the school reports he had received, with great marks, and my mother told me how proud she felt of our achievements at school. My father had won a 4-figure prize, but once more foolishly lost everything in his enthusiasm. I rushed to see the calendar. It was most definitely the following year's Christmas. There was no time between last year and the current one, and there was no difference about me when passing into the following time. Only the calendar year was altered. When I originally went to bed, there was no snow, and the weather was a mild winter's day, whereas this time I was told that this year we had an awful winter. Icicles were hanging from all corners of homes in the neighborhood. I was so stunned to find that our mother had designed 2 beautiful shirts for my brother and me, Mine was purple waves on white, and my brother's was olive green waves on white. But my brother wanted to have what was to be mine for some reason, notwithstanding his would be far too small for me. We were to visit a newly refurbished restaurant with our cousins, aunt, and father by the big dam somewhere. I could not believe it, but had no choice other than accept the situation. I still have no proper explanation. What stunned me most was that before my waking into that new time in my dream state, I was told all about it by a very resonant-sounding voice that we have jumped the year. Yet I did not age, while others became a year older. The following Christmas could become just the same if I wished. That would be extraordinary. Yes, indeed. I would love to do it again. However, I could also delay it, if I desired. Alas, I could not mention it to anybody without being laughed at, because I knew it was something I needed to keep to myself. I was to experience this event a few more times, and was to learn more about it in my adult years. However, I discovered that I could not influence any occurrence around me, other than ardently desire certain events to take place. Perhaps I was doing necessary things in the shortest period of time. Upon waking within this freshly jumped period in time, that everything I wished for had happened, but deep inside I knew that at the moment it would be impossible to do those things and achieve higher degrees. I could not reconcile nor fully understand this. All I knew was that jumping time was possible. Dreaming? Maybe. I recall yet another occasion from my childhood when we were told about certain sinister spirits at night time. They could, for instance, allegedly scare us by creating fire in the toilet bowl. At first I did not believe it, but one night, when I frequented the outside toilet, I have seen it happen. I thought that it was probably a prank some people engaged in to frighten us young children. When I spoke about it to others, I was laughed at. My cousins, too, giggled madly, and so I suggested they should go to that toilet in the middle of the night and see how they liked it. They may have been the culprits in the first place, but I have no proof. I remember how some of my friends used to throw firecrackers through the open window of a mentally disabled brother and sister on the street where my aunt used to live. Since I was seen amongst those friends, with some of whom my brother was encouraged to sell those small sweets they called kader, they thought of catching and teaching a lesson to the silly boys I was deemed to be a part of. There was a Sudanese lady who grabbed me, while the brother of the two mentally disabled people pulled my left ear to punish all those naughty children. I struggled to get away and ended up with a badly torn left ear, bleeding extensively. I quickly ran to my aunt's where she contacted my mother, and they rushed me to the hospital, where my ear was stitched back in place. Luckily, it healed quickly, and I did not lose my hearing. I still cannot understand why I had to be the one punished for my so-called friends' wrongs. Neither can I ever forget how one of our neighborhood friends asked us to share an experience after he had obtained a number of red and green flares from his father's workplace at the local fire department. We burned them on street corners and enjoyed the exciting and beautiful bright flares which lasted for long periods of time. The whole neighborhood enjoyed this spectacle, although some complained, worrying that we could cause an accident or start a fire. I also remember the times when we used to make paper Chinese lanterns with lit candles attached underneath.